fists tight and I'm screaming out loud and it's like I'm just roaring like a fierce tiger, like an angry tiger, and letting this all out of me. You're listening to Joey's Taxi, conversations from the seat of awareness. No fixing, no forcing, just shared presence. Let's ride. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the show. Today I'm going to offer my reflections based on our first episode with Kat Mahale, who is a therapeutic photographer and doing amazing work with other human beings, specifically with women, in regards to tapping into their felt sense and using photography to connect that bridge. So I'm going to go through my notes here. Kat offered a couple of photos in that episode, one of them being a self-portrait that she took from 2018. Now I'm going to review this right now, and I have it up on my screen. I'm going to be sharing this here as well. So if you're watching, or if you're in the audio version of Spotify, then you can switch over to the video or watch this on YouTube. I will also have a link to these photos in the show notes. I'm looking at the photo here that Kat submitted, and here she is with this barbed wire that's circling around her head, going upwards to the crown of her head. She has a look of being distraught. It looks pretty painful, actually. And so what I'm interpreting from this photo is that all the busyness in our heads can be, for me, interpreted as this barbed wire. This barbed wire is going in all these different directions, curling up above her head. And that could be the busyness of our minds, the chaotic states of minds that we can sometimes get ourselves into when we identify with our thoughts, instead of just observing those thoughts, but we attach to them. And then once we put energy into those thoughts, they kind of spiral out of control a bit there. And that's what leads to unpleasant sensations, stress, overwhelm, burnout, for example. And now if I look at this barbed wire going around her head, I see that it is going right above her eyes, so just missing the eyes. And I think that is significant for me because it's not going through the eyes or in front of the eyes, I should say. It's more above the eyes. So maybe perhaps it's more about looking up into that barbed wire or into those distractions, those thoughts, unpleasant sensations, to be observant of them. In this day and age, we have our mobile phones. I think a lot of us are looking downwards most of the time now. Looking down on our computers, down on our mobile phones, down on the ground as we're walking, instead of looking upwards and being more observant of our environment. Maybe taking in some fresh scents as we're walking through a park or walking through a cityscape, for example, and just being observant of what is going on in our external environment. And it goes down the barbed wire to the bottom of her chin. That signifies to me that there is this blockage, or in Sanskrit it's called samskara, where there's this blockage that's going above her neck. So it's right where the chin is. So above the neck, all the way to the crown. For me, that is encompassing, maybe we can say, two of the chakras there. We have the middle eye, or the energy space between the brows, and then the crown chakra. And perhaps those two could be blocked for this woman. At least, again, this is my perspective, and it's only my perspective. It is not the actual truth or what is actually happening in this photograph with Kat. But I'd like to offer up my solo reflections here. Now, she goes on to say, if we go back to the show notes here, she talks about going in and out of talk therapy with no progress. Now, I can certainly relate to this because back in 2018, I was working for the Apple company in one of the Apple stores in Southern California. At the time, I was a salesperson, and I was having a very hard time. The year before, I didn't get this big promotion. I learned that it was because of these political reasons. I didn't necessarily feel so good about not getting this position for political reasons. I put in the hard work. I built up this body of work only to be told that someone else played better politics than I did. And that is the name of the game when it comes to working for big corporations. And even this happens in smaller companies, family-owned companies, which I've also worked in before. I started dating this woman, and it only lasted for about 3 months. She had a child from another father. I got attached not only to her, but to the child. And during this time, it was an unhealthy attachment. I was more of the, if we're talking about secure attachment styles, it was more about me being the anxious attachment style. She was the avoidant. As I got closer to her or attempted to get closer to her, she would pull away. And then that pulling away would only make me more anxious and want to even give her more attention and smother her in many ways, which would cause her to want to separate that distance or create a larger distance between the two of us. Then, after she broke up with me because of, we can call it clinginess, it was hard on me. I didn't just lose this woman, I lost her child as well. It reminded me of back when my stepdad came into my life when I was about 8 or 9 years young. And I could see myself at some point, maybe in life, being the stepdad to someone else's child, as my stepdad was. His name was Phil back then. I created this story in my head about being this stepdad to this child way early on, right? Without, even though there was unhealthy attachments there, I was still creating this story in my head. And I lost to both of them. Then from there, I just kind of spiraled downwards very, very fast. Now, I also have had a history of issues and challenges around alcohol, drugs, toxic relationships. Well, I went into what I knew best, and that was just to get drunk, get high on a regular basis, and yeah, just forget about the world, numb myself. And it's exactly what I did. I did that for a few months. I started hanging out with colleagues from work that were much younger than me and were very much into the party scene. I allowed myself to go into that dark place. I would say it was very dark for me. Now, there's a monumental moment here of 2018. That year in the United States, we have Thanksgiving, end of November. I went to a colleague's house for Thanksgiving. My dad was visiting me from Florida. Again, we're in California. I was dating a new woman, also very toxic relationship. I was the avoidant in that one. She was the anxious. Kind of switched the roles there. I've had this in a history of my relationships, being in this mixed role, dissociation. She was there, and another colleague was there. Also, my colleague's neighbor was there. Her name is Ashley Waugh. Here I am at the dinner table. We're all at the dinner table and celebrating Thanksgiving, giving our thanks, and appreciating the company around us. Good times, good vibes. Not for me, though. I didn't feel these good times or these uplifting times. There was no good vibes about it at all. As a matter of fact, I felt the complete opposite. I felt very down. I felt depressed. Just didn't know where life was going or where life was taking me. Instead of giving thanks to the table, I went ahead and I just blurted it all out. What was going on in my life? How life for me was just spiraling downwards. I felt like I was out of control. I didn't know what to do about it. But if I didn't do something about it, then I don't know. I don't know where it would go from there. But I felt completely detached from everything, including myself. Now, unbeknownst to me, the neighbor I mentioned before is sitting across from me, actually directly across from me at this dinner table, Ashley Waugh. She is today 82 years young. So she's about 40 years of a difference between myself and her. And here she is, sitting across the table, listening to me and looking at me attentively, like full attention. Everyone else on the table, I think they were listening, but she was like laser focused. And after the end of my spiel, she said to me, well, she has some really probing questions there, and mentioned to me about this book, The 5 Second Rule by Mel Robbins, asked me to read this book and contact her in a week. And I thought that, I know if she's worked with some people before, and I've met her a handful of times before at these national holidays at my colleague's house. So I read the book, and then a week later I contacted her. She asked me to come over to her home, and I did. And I thought we were just going to have a conversation. I was going to share more about my life story, and she was just going to sit there, listen, maybe give me some guidance. Well, what I learned is that she has a life history of teaching and coaching for life skills. So she was a life coach and still is a life coach in many ways, actually. She took me through life coaching activities, and it was quite extraordinary, I have to say. We were there for about a couple hours, and my mind was blown. I was not expecting this life coaching. The beautiful thing is that we had this exchange, a mutually honored and respected exchange where I would take her to the grocery store to pick up some medication by car. She doesn't drive. Would fix some things around the apartment as well. A little bit of a handyman, I suppose. That's what we did. I exchanged some rides, some house repairs for her life coaching. We worked together for a couple of months. Now, during this time as well, in the beginning of this, I knew that I wouldn't be able to work on myself wholeheartedly the way I wanted to if I still had to go to work every single day to Apple, which was a full-time gig for me at the time. I applied for medical leave with Apple. I was honored this medical leave, and in totality, I had it for 3 months. I was 3 months off from Apple. I worked on myself every single day. I read books. I did the exercises that Ashley asked me to do, read books she suggested. Not only was I going to Ashley, and she was hugely beneficial, but I mention this because she was part of my support system. I also had a therapist and a psychiatrist that I was going to. Now, this therapist, going back to what Kat was mentioning about going in and out of talk therapy with no progress. My progress came through Ashley, but through talk therapy, there were some realizations. I got a little bit of clarity, but I also didn't feel like I was making much progress there as well, as with the psychiatrist. I can definitely relate to Kat's story about going to talk therapy. Now, she did it for many, many years compared to what I did it for, a handful of months there. And I did rotate between, I think I had in total 3 different therapists. I kept changing because I wasn't happy with the other ones. I eventually found one that was really good. That's where my extent of therapy went in 2018 for about those 3 months. And now going down in my notes here, Kat also talked about extending compassion from looking at self-portraits. I'm going to include actually a photo of my self-portrait. But now let's go to her photo. I'm going to put this up on the screen here as well, as it'll also be a link in the show notes. This first photo of her with the barbed wire that we were talking about before, she talks about this photo is a request from her to don't forget, in Kat's words. Don't forget where you've come from, where you are, and where you were going. She talks about self-acceptance and non-judgmental within this self-portrait. I can totally vibe with that because in my self-portrait is an embodiment of a hypnotherapy appointment that I was in with my therapist, Donna, about 2 years ago. And I went to hypnotherapy for a year. It was a program. I learned hypnotherapy, and I also received hypnotherapy. In this photo, it's a series of photos. It's a sequence. And I picked this particular one because this is the one I felt like had a lot of energy behind it, a lot of anger. Because what I learned in hypnotherapy, which I didn't know before, is that I had a lot of pent up energy in me, a lot of anger in me. This anger manifested in, well, numbing myself, alcohol, drugs, toxic relationships, love addiction. I used this to cover up the anger so it wouldn't come out. Now, I didn't know I was doing this at the time, but this is in essence what was happening. This photo depicts me actually embodying this anger. Now, where did the anger come from? Well, it came from my 2 parents. My 2 parents, I loved them dearly, and they also suffered from alcohol challenges. My dad was a bit of an aggressor. My mom was more of the one who just kind of took it all, but they both complement each other in the sense of the drinking. When all this was going on, growing up from a very early age, from when I was about 2 years young, I didn't know how to process this energy, these experiences. I bottled it all up. I put it deep down inside of me. And what I did was whenever I felt uncomfortable when they were arguing and intoxicated, I would go run to another room in our small 1-bedroom apartment in the Bronx, New York, and try to find a corner as far away from them as possible and just curl up into a little ball like I depicted in this photo. In this photo, I am kind of curled up. I'm sitting on one foot, and the other one is sprawled out underneath of me. My knee is bent on the foot that I'm sitting on, and I am just fists tight, and I'm screaming out loud, and it's like I'm just roaring like a fierce tiger, like an angry tiger, and letting this all out of me. Right? And I did this not in when I was a kid, but I did it as an adult and in my hypnotherapy sessions. I was able to really connect with that anger, which underneath of that was a bunch of sadness, and underneath of that was some fear, because we have these two core emotions, love and fear. The sadness was covering up this. Why are they yelling? Why are they screaming? Why am I feeling uncomfortable? I don't know what this is in me. Why my body feels so unsafe? I created a series of photos of me building up this energy and just letting it out like a fierce lion. And then consoling myself and ended this series, which I called Fight, Freeze. Now, if we go back to her self-portrait, and then we talk about the self-portrait that I shared as well. Kat talks about the felt sense, feeling into ourselves within these portraits. She describes felt sense as the holistic embodied response to any given situation. It's the meaning underneath our feelings, the stuff we don't have words for, the stuff that we're bringing forth from our subconscious into our conscious. It's kind of not knowing. She goes on to say that to come out of your head, drop into your body, sense what is going on in your body, and notice feelings and sensations, and then sit with what's underneath them and what your body is asking you to notice. It's like tapping into the flowing river of love for ourselves and others. That's what I did with my self-portraits. This is what Kat does with her self-portrait. You don't have to be a photographer or have any photography experience to do this for yourself. I do have a free guide you can download. There's a link in the notes here that describes using our mobile phones. So using mindful mobile photography to take self-portraits of ourselves and sit with these photos, to be more mindful with our mobiles and use them in a way that actually can be healing, can create more presence and awareness within us. Now, some questions you can ask yourself if you take a photo of yourself, a mindful and intentional self-portrait. I call this self-me. It's a play on words from the selfie phenomenon, where people are trying to take the best photo possible and different angles. The lighting has to be right, and the hair and the smile. And if not, then you delete it, take another one. We have that flexibility with technology today. It's not like back in the day where I grew up with analog cameras, where you had to be really mindful with that photo that you took, because you only had, what depend on the film, 10 exposures, 24, 36. And then after that, you have to go take it to a film shop, get it developed, and then get it back and see what they look like. Hope that you get some at least 1 or 2 or 3 good shots out of it, if not more. Now we have this the cloud, virtually unlimited memory. We can just take hundreds, thousands of photos. Well, the self-me is more about taking that one photo and sitting with it, not trying to look perfect or put on a mask or portray yourself to be somebody that you're not. In the sense of, if you're feeling not so good inside, but then you still put a smile to take this photo, well, then that's not really truly stepping into awareness. That is trying to portray yourself to look a certain way to please others, to let others know that you're doing all right, even if you're not doing okay. But it's okay to not be okay. It reminds me of that song from Nightbird, and the name of the song is It's Okay. Going back to these questions, what can you ask yourself if you take a self-me or a mindful self-portrait? If you didn't know this person, what would you say about them? We're talking about our photos in a third-person perspective, because typically when we do this, it takes out the judgment out of it. Definitely advise to look at your photos. I invite you to look at your photos from a third-person perspective. Not, I look this way, I feel this way, but this man or this woman looks this way, feels this way, might needing something or a message to tell me. Let me go on to these other questions. Again, the first one, if you didn't know this person, what would you say about them? Second question, What do you think they want you to know? What's their message for you? Now, these are wonderful questions. You can come up with your own questions. This is also known as self-inquiry. And just inquire. Do a inner investigation of how you are in this very moment. I'd like to talk about Kat's book. It is called What Now? This book is about stories of real people during our lockdown, during the pandemic, and what they did during the pandemic. How did they keep themselves busy? Or how did they keep themselves from being lonely? Or if they were lonely, what did they do about it? Some real life stories in here. The link to purchase this book will be in the show notes. If I go over to page 186, the photo I submitted, this photo here is of a friend in California. I made this composite here of the COVID-19 sign. I put like COVID-19 on the wall. You know those signs where it says no smoking? No smoking has like a red circle with a line going through it. I have this as well, this COVID-19, and then I have this circle with a red line going through it. And then I have this painted face mask on my friend's face. Her name is Brielle. I call this photo Surrender and Allow. She's looking down. She's looking very sad, looking defeated. I think how a lot of people felt during the pandemic. I took it as an opportunity because of how busy the Apple Store was. At this point, when COVID came around, I was already back in the Apple Store. This is the beginning of 2019. I went back after those 3 months of a medical leave. It was quite challenging to be back. Challenging in the sense of I was accepting my reality, but I still wasn't happy being there. I slowly started building an exit strategy. Then when COVID hit and the store locked down, the world locked down for that matter. Reflecting back on the pandemic, I learned that Apple was a very toxic environment for me. Very fast-paced. Everything was held to a number, a KPI, key performance indicator, and I just didn't like the idea of being held to a number, being a cog in the wheel. There was a lot of hardships. There were people who passed away. I also want to acknowledge that. In my own experience, I realized the importance of having peace and calm within myself. That's why I started building this exit strategy to leave Apple. What that exit strategy looked like was teaching English to small children in Spain, in Madrid. That is the path that I followed for 2019. Going back to the pandemic, if I would ask myself, what did I learn? Or what new hobbies, or what did I do that was different to keep myself entertained, so to speak? That was composite work with photography. I hit a road bump with my photography. I didn't have any enthusiasm with it anymore. Taking portraits and swimwear types of shots, university graduations. I learned to do composite work. And the compositing work, it reignited that excitement for my photography. If you don't know what compositing is, it's when you layer photos on top of each other, or you take objects from another photo and you embed them into the current photo that you edited. You can make them as fantastical as you want them to look like. This was the key ingredient to get me back on track. There was some YouTube videos that I watched by Gary McIntyre on YouTube. I'll leave a link to his YouTube. He was my foundation when it came to compositing work. He made it easy, fun, and exciting. I would love to ask you, the listeners, during COVID, what did you learn or spend time doing? We'd love for you to put that in the comments. I would love to hear about it and share your stories. Kat also talked about a pioneer in therapeutic photography. Her name is Judy Weiser. She's a Canadian psychologist and therapeutic photographer. I'm not sure this is exactly quoted from Judy Weiser, but Kat goes on to say about the story of an image is not in the image. It's in the viewer, and it takes into account their life up to that point. Now, how powerful is this? Now, when you look at an image, a lot of the times we just look at it and then we don't really place any significance to these instantaneous photos we take with our mobiles. Some of them have some meaning, others don't. But if we really fine-tune to these photos that we take, even of sceneries, of people, there's usually something there in our subconscious that connects with us taking that photo in the conscious. And if we're willing to dig deep enough or have the guidance of someone who's experienced to guide you along. It's quite extraordinary the things you can learn from it. The felt sense. I would like to mention about dropping into the felt sense throughout your day. Kat talks about this is what she does to find presence in her life. Taking pauses or journaling. The remembering to pause and to feel into the body. Drop out of the mind. Noticing oneself of overreacting and using the reactions as a kind reminder. Also works with pleasant feelings. This is very, very important. I'd like to mention a tool that you can try on your own. It's called a 5 sense meditation. You're using all your 5 senses to bring you back to the presence, to the here and now. How this works is completely flexible. This is not a strict structure to this 5 sense meditation. I like to do it where I start off with the top number, 5. 5, I'll use my eyesight. So notice 5 things in my immediate environment with my eyes. Then, after I spend a few moments doing that, this can be a few seconds, doesn't have to be long. It can be as short or as long as you want it to be. 5 things I see, then 4 things that I can hear. Pay attention to 4 different sounds in my environment. Spend a few moments there, then I count down to 3. What are 3 things I can touch? My shirts, my shorts. All right, maybe I'm touching, there's a tree outside and I'm touching the tree. Count down to 2. What are 2 things I can smell? And then 1. What is 1 thing I can taste? Maybe it's a coffee I just had prior. Maybe it's a cheesecake I ate. I love my sweets. New York cheesecake are my favorite for obvious reasons. What is something I can still taste in my mouth? Now again, the things that we see, pay attention to the details. Are we looking at leaves, the road, cars, the colors? Let's look at those textures. Pay attention to the finite details of each step. You can move these around, but this is how I like to do this 5 sense meditation. I invite you to try it out. And if you do, let us know in the comments what that's like for you and what you experience from it. Also, to practice with pleasant emotions to build resilience. Sometimes it may be challenging to, in the moment, to catch those unpleasant emotions and try to sit with them. I think maybe with the pleasant emotions, feeling really great. Maybe your partner surprised you with a bounty chocolate and coconut cake for your birthday the morning of, because she knows that you love chocolate and coconut combined together. And it's like, wow, what a great feeling. Sit with that feeling. Don't disregard and be like, oh, great, thank you for the cake and, hug and a kiss. Actually sit with that kid. Do the hug, do the kiss, right? Acknowledge your partner. Then maybe just take a few moments to really be with that. And what's it like to feel this appreciation, this gratitude, this love for this person within yourself? Recognize it. Where is it coming from? Located in the body. Right? Is it around the heart-centered space? Maybe you give it a color. You can give it a texture. You can really describe this within you and kind of observe it as best as you can. Now, there's a second photo that Kat offered to share with all of us, and this is a photo that she has never shared publicly before. It is of Kat. It's also a self-portrait, and there's seems to be like a sheet in front of her. It's see-through. She's wrapped in this shawl. You can't see her face, so you can imagine a sheet wrapped around somebody, and she has her arms going across her chest there. Here she says, revealing the shadow side, not covering it up, allowing it to move, allowing it to breathe, allowing it to be seen, heard, validated. This reminds me of a quote from Carl Jung, and it goes like this. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It's taking the courage and bravery to step into those shadow sides of us, the sides that we typically push deep down inside. I did this for a long time growing up. I pushed all the uncomfortable emotions deep down inside. Those became my shadow elements. And it wasn't until, truly, when I worked with Ashley Waugh and also with hypnotherapy, I was able to have the confidence and the courage to look into those shadows and bring them out from the darkness, shine a light onto them. To describe hypnotherapy is like going into your basement or your attic with a flashlight, and maybe also opening up some closed and locked doors you haven't been in, and going into rooms you haven't explored in a long time, opening up some old boxes. That's where the shadows lay. And it's not about getting rid of them or pushing them away. It's more about understanding them having compassion for them. They were there to protect you while you were growing up, doing experiences that didn't make sense at the time, but they're no longer needed. They're not your story. So yes, I love this about revealing the shadow side. And Kat also said that the message to her, if you go back to these prompts of asking ourselves what these self-portraits are saying to us, she says, feeling a pull to receive and embrace from her, to embrace this shadow element of her persona. Now, Kat, since then, has offered an additional reflection based on this self-portrait of her covered up in this sheet, or this shawl. I'm going to include that audio.
This image is about hidden away parts of me waiting to be revealed. I'm sensing a need to remain in the shadows, but still I want to be heard, primarily by myself. There's a need and reflection for self-care and not hiding behind busyness and procrastination. There's an admission of what is. I still feel a sense of mothering and reparenting of myself in this image. I think that was one of the things I said in the interview. There's a reflection to create space for comfort and safety, to nurture the pain of loss that still exists within me. There's a request here not to fade away from myself, to continue to look within and do the hard work, to sit with what is, the uncomfortable, my journey, what's coming and what might be, to remain in the present, to live in the now, bringing all parts of me home so I remain whole, and to honor the fight.
And there you have it. I want to thank Kat again for coming on the show, for sharing these very intimate photos, especially the one that she has not shown publicly yet until now. I want to thank all of you, the listeners, for jumping in Joey's Taxi, going for a ride. Until next time, see you soon. Thanks for riding along. If you'd like to stay connected, follow the podcast and leave a mindful review. Until next time, stay in the seat.